Rain slid down the windshield like liquid glass, blurring the small-town church into a smear of lights and shadows. Jack tightened his grip on the steering wheel, jaw tense, heart pounding in a rhythm he hadn't felt in years. He had signed million-dollar contracts, spoken on glass stages, worn suits that cost more than most people's cars. But nothing had ever made his chest ache like that old white church at the top of the hill. The one place he had sworn he'd never return to. The place where he'd once promised a future he never kept. The place where he had walked away. From God, from simplicity, from her. Through the rain and glass, he saw a faint, golden glow spilling out through the church windows. It was late. Too late for Sunday service. Too quiet for a wedding. Yet the doors were slightly open, and inside, a single figure knelt near the altar. Blonde curls caught the candlelight, trembling slightly as her shoulders rose and fell in silent prayer. Her blue eyes were closed, face tilted up as if the ceiling had become a window straight into heaven. The same softness in her features, the same quiet strength he once mocked as naivety. Madison. His breath left his lungs in a broken exhale he didn't recognize as his. He hadn't said her name in years, but inside the car it echoed like a confession. Madison, the girl his wealthy family had called too simple. The one his mother said would ruin his future if he didn't let go in time. The one his father had dismissed with a cold sentence. You don't throw away a legacy for a girl who owns nothing. So Jack chose the legacy. Or at least, he told himself he did. He watched her lips move in prayer, though he couldn't hear the words. Every so often she wiped tears with the back of her hand, then folded them again stubbornly, in faith. There was no camera, no audience, no one to impress, just a girl, and her God. Just the woman he had left behind when the price tag on his soul started climbing. He felt for the first time in a long time like he was on the outside of something holy, looking in. He had walked away for riches, hammered, polished, and sold an identity that never fit quite right. Now God had brought him back, not to negotiate, not to impress, but to watch. To see what he had traded away when he chose gold over grace. To see that she didn't just move on, she went deeper. Deeper into prayer, deeper into purpose, deeper into the God he spent years ignoring. And as he sat there, hidden in the shadows of the parking lot, one thought burned like fire in his mind. I left her on my way up, and I'm seeing her again now that everything inside me has fallen down. If you've ever been on either side of that story, if someone walked away from you for status, money, or family approval, or if you were the one who left, thinking success could silence the ache in your chest, this story is for you. Stay with me until the end, because what God does with Madison and Jack will remind you of something powerful. He doesn't just restore what was lost. He transforms it into something richer than any fortune. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Redeemed Hearts, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to remember that God still writes stories after heartbreak. Madison had always loved quiet mornings in their small town. The kind where the sky was still pale and the street smelled like fresh bread from the bakery. She walked down Main Street balancing a tray of coffee cups, her blonde curls tucked into a messy bun. The cafe where she worked had been there for decades, its walls full of stories and second chances. She liked to imagine prayers floating under the chatter, rising with the steam from the cups. It was simple, yes, but to her, simple never meant small. Jack, on the other hand, had always walked like the world owed him space. When he opened the glass door of the cafe that morning years ago, the bell chimed like an announcement. He wore a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to show he belonged both to work and to a life beyond it. His brown hair was neatly styled, eyes green and sharp, scanning the room like everything was a transaction, except when he saw Madison behind the counter, laughing with an elderly customer. For a brief second, his expression softened, like he had just remembered something he never had. He wasn't from that town, not really. His family owned properties there, investments his father barely visited. To the locals, the Reynolds name was attached to the big house on the hill and the company that employed half the county. To Jack, it was a weight disguised as privilege. He had been sent to check on operations, but everyone knew he was being groomed. Every move watched, every decision measured against the legacy he was meant to protect. There was no room in those calculations for someone like Madison. He ordered coffee, but what he really wanted was the girl who poured it. Madison smiled without trying, eyes bright, cheeks slightly flushed from rushing around. "Rough morning?" she asked, noticing the tension in his shoulders. "You have no idea," he muttered, then caught himself forcing a polite half-smile. She laughed softly, as if the heaviness didn't scare her. "Coffee first, then the world is easier to carry." He hadn't realized until later that this sentence would become a memory he'd replay on sleepless nights. They started talking in fragments. 3 minutes at the counter, 5 minutes when the cafe was empty. She asked about his work, not with greed, but curiosity. He asked about her life, surprised to find out she had never left town but dreamed big anyway. "Maybe I don't need bigger places," she said one morning, leaning on the counter. "Maybe I just need deeper roots." He wanted to tell her that roots terrified him, that staying felt like failure. Instead, he just watched the way she spoke about God as if he was a person she had coffee with daily. Madison didn't know what to call what was happening between them at first. All she knew was that her heart beat differently when he walked through the door. She prayed more, not less, whenever he sat at his usual table by the window. "Lord, if this is not from you, take away the desire," she whispered one night, hands clasped tight. "But if it is, teach me to love without losing who I am." She didn't ask for riches. She asked for courage. Jack, meanwhile, tried to keep things cleanly separated. There was the life his parents had mapped out. Law school, board meetings, charity galas, strategic marriages. And then there was this detour. The way his chest lightened whenever Madison laughed. The way ancient scriptures on her lips sounded less like rules and more like warmth. He told himself it was temporary, something he could enjoy before going back to the real world. He didn't notice when temporary started feeling like home. His mother met Madison once by accident. She arrived at the cafe unannounced, pearls at her neck, judgment in her eyes. Madison wiped her hands on her apron and greeted her with the same kindness she gave everyone. "Mrs. Reynolds, it's so nice to finally meet you," she said, unaware of the storm behind that flawless smile. His mother's gaze swept over Madison's simple dress, flower on her fingers, hair in its familiar messy bun. "Charming," she said, the word sharp enough to cut. Jack heard every syllable. That evening, the conversation at the big house on the hill was anything but gentle. His father sat at the head of the long mahogany table, hands folded, eyes cold. "I heard you've been spending time with one of the locals," he began. Jack tried to keep his tone light. "Her name is Madison. She's kind, smart, grounded." His mother dabbed her lips delicately with a napkin, as if love were a mess she had to clean. "Jack, we didn't raise you for this," she said. "You are not throwing away everything for a girl who has nothing." He argued that Madison wasn't nothing, that she had more integrity than half the people in their circles. But his father countered with numbers, investments, partnerships, marriages that would merge empires. "Feelings pass," his father said flatly, "but decisions stay on the record." They spoke of him as if he were a company asset, not a son. By the end of the night, he was left with an ultimatum. Leave Madison or risk losing access to the fortune he'd been promised since childhood. He drove to the cafe with the ultimatum sitting like lead in his chest. Madison spotted him from across the room, smile instinctive, pure. She took off her apron when her shift ended and joined him outside, where the sun was dipping low. "Are you okay?" she asked, reading the storm in his eyes. He wanted to say, "No, I'm being asked to choose between you and everything I've ever known." But pride wrapped itself around his throat, and fear did the rest. They sat on the curb, their shoulders barely touching. He stared at his hands while she watched the sky turn colors. "You know I care about you, right?" he started, the words already tasting like betrayal. Madison nodded, a shy smile forming. "I know. I care about you too." He felt like a thief as he exhaled. "My life is complicated. My family has expectations." She didn't interrupt. She just listened, like she always did. "There are deals on the line. People depending on me. A future already written," he went on. And I don't think I can give you what you deserve." Madison frowned, confusion replacing soft joy. "You talk like love is a negotiation," she said quietly. "I don't need mansions, Jack. I just need truth." Her words hit the one place he'd kept locked. Truth scared him more than losing money ever could. He resorted to the one language he knew best: distance. "I'm leaving," he said abruptly. "Back to the city. Back to everything." Her hands tightened around the bracelet she always wore, a small silver cross. "For how long?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He lied without thinking. "I don't know." The air between them shifted, thick with unsaid things. Madison searched his eyes for something: hesitation, regret, a fight. But Jack had already started building walls, brick by brick, word by word. "It's better this way," he added, like a signature at the end of a contract. "For you. For me. For my family." He didn't mention God. He wasn't sure he believed God was part of this story at all. Madison swallowed hard, the taste of metal and heartbreak flooding her mouth. "Did God tell you that?" she asked softly. "Or did your parents?" He flinched, but didn't answer. Silence stretched between them, louder than any argument. Finally, she nodded, more to herself than to him. "If you need to go, go. But don't pretend you're doing me a favor." When he drove away that night, the town lights became small stars in his rearview mirror. He told himself he was choosing wisely, choosing responsibly, choosing the path he had been trained for. He repeated his father's words like a prayer. Feelings pass. Decisions stay on the record. He didn't realize that some decisions etch themselves onto the soul. He didn't notice the tear that slid down his cheek until it blurred the road. He wiped it away quickly, as if weakness were the only unforgivable thing. Behind him, Madison stood under the street lamp, watching his taillights disappear. That night, Madison didn't throw anything, didn't scream, didn't curse his name. She went home, closed her bedroom door, and fell to her knees. Her blonde curls tumbled over her face as she pressed her forehead to the mattress. "God, I don't understand," she whispered, tears soaking the blanket. "But I trust you more than I trust my feelings." The words shook, but they came anyway. "Don't let this break me. Let it build me." Days turned into weeks. Jack signed his first big deal in the city, wearing a new suit and a practiced smile. People clapped him on the back, calling him brilliant, strategic, promising. At night, alone in his high-rise apartment, he stared at the ceiling and thought of coffee steam and blue eyes. He told himself this was the cost of greatness. That love was a distraction, faith a weakness, small towns a chapter he'd outgrown. But no amount of money quieted the ache. Back in the small town, Madison started waking up earlier to pray. Not "God, bring him back," but "God, don't let my heart harden." She chose to keep serving coffee, keep smiling, keep loving people who walked through the door. Some whispered about Jack leaving, about Madison being too simple for someone like him. She refused to let their words define her worth. Her worth was already written in hands that had been nailed to a cross long before Jack's name ever entered her story. And heaven silently began to write a different ending than the one Jack's parents had planned. Jack believed the city would erase the past, but it did the opposite. The first months were full of contracts, corporate dinners, and praise that sparkled like gold yet felt hollow. He moved through skyscrapers like a man wearing a custom-made mask. Behind it, silence echoed louder than applause. The emptiness had a name, and he avoided even thinking it. On the longest nights, he walked around his penthouse trying to outrun his own thoughts. The apartment was modern and expensive, filled with objects that carried no memories. He opened the windows to let the cold air in, hoping it might settle the restlessness inside him. But no matter how much he breathed, something was always missing. Something money could never buy. In meetings, he spoke with practiced confidence, but his eyes revealed fatigue. Coworkers admired his strategic coldness, unaware it was simply armor. His father praised him for finally being on the right path. His mother texted short, polished messages. "Proud of you, darling." But none of it sounded honest, not even to him. One night after a corporate dinner, He walked down the bustling street with his hands in his suit pockets. The cold wind brushed his face, reminding him of early mornings in Madison's cafe, of the bread smell, the soft laughter she carried even when tired, of how she spoke about God as if he sat on the chair beside her. He shook his head fast, as if the memory were a mistake he needed to erase. The wealthy life demanded constant devotion, like a jealous God that was never satisfied. The more Jack gave, the more it demanded. More time, more energy, more pieces of his soul. He obeyed every expectation because he believed this was destiny, until the day he realized it was simply slavery with a golden frame. The turning point came on an ordinary morning while he signed documents he didn't care to read. His phone lit up with a message from an employee back in the small town. It was a photo of the cafe where Madison worked. The front had been renovated, flowers decorated the doorway, and a new sign shone proudly above it. For a moment, air refused to enter his lungs. The caption read, "Town is growing. The new owner is very loved." New owner. The word struck him like thunder. Madison hadn't just moved on, she had risen without him, despite him. Above him. Jack dropped the pen, feeling the ground tilt under his feet. Admiration and shame collided inside his chest. How had he dared to see her as small? How could he have believed she needed him to become someone? The truth cut through his pride like a blade. He was the one who needed her. That night, he tried drowning the discomfort in work. He signed reports, reviewed numbers, and closed entire deals. Nothing helped. The image of the cafe door haunted every thought, and behind it, Madison's smile, now belonging to a world where he no longer fit. The weight eventually became physical. Jack slept poorly, waking from dreams where boardrooms blurred with memories of Madison praying. Sometimes he saw her at the altar, eyes closed, light resting on her face. He woke breathless, chest tight, as if he had forgotten how to breathe, as if God himself were trying to get his attention. But going back meant facing truths he had buried deep. It meant admitting he chose money over love, status over character, his parents' approval over God's voice. And he wasn't sure he was ready for that confession. The breaking point came during a charity gala filled with people smiling only with their lips. Violins played, glasses clinked, laughter floated without warmth. Jack looked around and saw emptiness. Nothing that fed the soul. Nothing that could rival the sound of Madison's laugh carried by morning light. During a dull speech, he caught himself whispering, "What am I doing here?" The question escaped like a confession, as if his conscience had slipped out without permission. He turned his face away and left the ballroom before anyone noticed. Outside, the night was quiet and cold. The wind lifted his brown hair, making him shiver. And then, for the first time in years, he spoke to God. "I don't know who I am anymore." His voice cracked under the weight of it. He covered his face with both hands, feeling the pressure of years of wrong decisions. "If you're still there, show me what to do." It wasn't a poetic prayer. Not beautiful, not rehearsed, just honest. And strangely, that honesty stirred something inside him. A door he had locked years ago seemed to shift. A small pull, almost impossible to notice. But real. A calling. A path back. Later that week, an employee mentioned casually, "Did you know the church back in town has late-night prayer meetings?" Jack froze. The word prayer felt heavy, intimate, familiar. Too familiar. He tried ignoring it. Tried filling his mind with work, with numbers, with noise. But on Friday night, without planning, without thinking, he grabbed his car keys and drove back to the place he swore he would never see again. Jack reached the outskirts of the small town just after 10 p.m. The roads were quiet, the kind of quiet you only find in places where everybody knows everybody. Street lamps cast soft yellow halos over empty sidewalks. Storefronts were dark except for the old gas station and the diner that never really closed. It felt like stepping back into a version of himself he had abandoned. He slowed down when he passed the cafe. Her cafe now. A warm, open sign glowed in the window, even though the chairs were stacked and lights were low. Fresh flowers hung by the door, the kind Madison always arranged in mason jars. He remembered teasing her once about her obsession with simple beauty. Now he'd give anything to live inside something that pure. The church sat on the hill like a guardian, its steeple rising against the night sky. The white paint looked freshly done, reflecting the soft glow of the parking lot lights. The double doors were cracked open, just enough for golden light to spill onto the steps. Jack parked far away, not ready to face anyone who might recognize him. His heart pounded like he was heading into a battlefield. Inside, the sanctuary was almost empty except for the gentle flicker of candles. He stepped quietly, his footsteps muffled by old carpet that smelled like hymnals and time. Then he saw her, kneeling at the front, hands folded, face lifted softly toward heaven. Her blonde curls fell over her shoulders like sunlight in a dark place, and all at once he forgot how to breathe. Madison hadn't changed in the ways that mattered. She still prayed like God was right there listening, still carried that kind of quiet strength people underestimate, still looked like the kind of woman who could rebuild a whole world with love and grit. But she was also more. There was a maturity in her posture now, the kind born from heartbreak healed by faith. A confidence that didn't come from achievements but from surrender. Jack watched her brush away a tear, then continue praying without shame. People in the city never cried in front of anyone unless they were drunk. But here, vulnerability was a language. He stayed near the back pew, hands shaking slightly. He felt like he didn't belong in the same room as her anymore, like he had forfeited his right to be part of any chapter of her story. But he stayed, unable to walk away a second time, not when the past was kneeling right there in front of him. Madison whispered something he couldn't hear, but he recognized the rhythm of prayer. It wasn't desperate, it was trusting. Not begging, it was surrendering. He remembered nights she prayed for him, thinking he was asleep. He wondered if she had stopped, or if he had just stopped listening. The pastor wasn't there. The sanctuary was open for what locals called quiet hours. Some came to think, some to breathe, some to talk to God without formality. Small towns didn't need schedules for everything. Heart matters had their own timing. Jack swallowed hard as guilt coated his tongue. Everything about this place felt honest, and he felt like an imposter in a suit. He tried to leave quietly, but the old floorboard betrayed him with a loud creak. Madison flinched and turned her head slightly. Jack froze, every muscle tight, praying she wouldn't look back. But Madison always had a quiet way of sensing people, especially him. She stood slowly, wiping her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater. Her blue eyes scanned the room, confused at first by the dim lighting. Then she saw the silhouette near the back, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar. Her breath hitched just a little. "Jack?" she whispered. He felt the word hit him like a memory wrapped in mercy. He stepped into the light without knowing how to explain why he was there. "Hey, Mads," he said softly, voice cracking on her nickname. It felt strange on his tongue after years of silence. Strange, but right. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the pew. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Not cold, just stunned. He searched for words that didn't sound rehearsed or polished. I was driving, and the church lights were on. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was the truest part he could say. Madison bit her lip, processing the moment like it was too delicate to touch. He walked a little closer, heart pounding so loud he was sure she could hear it. "I didn't expect to see you." Madison let out a small, breathy laugh, one of disbelief, not humor. "Well, this is home," she said softly. Something about the way she said home made his chest ache. She tucked a curl behind her ear, a gesture he remembered too well. "I heard you're doing big things in the city," she said gently. "Yeah," he replied, eyes dropping. "Big things don't always mean good things." She studied him with that honest, quiet gaze he once found terrifying. Not judging, just seeing. He exhaled shakily. "Madison, I'm not the guy I used to be." She nodded once. "I know." Silence stretched between them, fragile but open. Then she asked the one question he feared most. "Why are you here, Jack?" He swallowed hard. "I don't know," he confessed. "But something pulled me." Her expression softened. the way only someone who knows God intimately understands. Sometimes he does that, she whispered, especially when we've been running too long. Jack felt the weight of years settle and soften all at once. Standing there, in the glow of candlelight, facing the woman he left for wealth, he finally realized this moment wasn't coincidence. It was mercy. And mercy always comes before restoration. Madison sat down slowly in the front pew, giving Jack a small gesture to join her. He hesitated, unsure if he deserved to sit anywhere near her anymore. But she waited. Not demanding, not pushing, just offering space. That was always her way. Even when he didn't deserve gentleness, she still gave it. Jack lowered himself beside her, leaving a respectful distance. The sanctuary felt too quiet, like even the air was listening. Candles flickered along the walls, casting warm shadows over the wooden cross. This wasn't the boardroom he was used to. This was where truth didn't hide behind power. Madison clasped her hands together, eyes fixed on the altar. Jack, you didn't come here by accident. Her voice was soft but steady, shaped by faith and experience. He swallowed hard, the words getting stuck in his throat. No, he admitted. I don't think I did. She kept her eyes forward, giving him room to speak. He felt like he was being asked to reveal the part of himself he buried most deeply. The part he never let anyone see, not even in the city. Madison, there's something I never told you. She nodded once. I figured. He took a long breath, the kind you take before ripping open an old wound. My family didn't just disapprove. Her brows lifted slightly, but she stayed silent. They gave me an ultimatum, he continued, voice cracking. Leave you. Or lose everything. Madison blinked slowly, absorbing the blow. She didn't gasp or break down. She just let the truth settle. And somehow that hurt him more than anger would have. You should have told me, she said quietly. I deserved to know what I was being compared against. Jack looked down at his hands, ashamed. I was young, scared, and stupid. Madison let out a small breath that wasn't quite a laugh, wasn't quite a sigh. Fear makes us do things we regret. Yes, he whispered, and I regret all of it. She leaned back slightly, her curls brushing her shoulders. So, you chose them. Her tone wasn't accusatory, just truthful. He nodded slowly. I chose money, a reputation, their approval, and it never made you happy, she added, not as a question but a fact. He met her eyes for the first time. No, it made me hollow. She nodded again, the smallest, saddest smile touching her lips. I always prayed you'd figure that out someday. Her words hit him like a warm beam of light and guilt at the same time. You prayed for me? Jack? I never stopped. He felt something twist inside his chest, something tender and painful all at once. I didn't deserve that. Madison tilted her head. That's the thing about grace, it's never about deserving. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. Her voice sounded like the very thing he'd been running from. Truth, wrapped in kindness. He rubbed his palms together, trying to settle the tremor in his hands. Madison, I didn't come here to get you back. She nodded, relieved maybe, or just grounded. I didn't assume you did. But, he added softly, I just needed to see you. Madison's eyes softened just a fraction. And what did you see? He swallowed the lump forming in his throat. Someone I should have never walked away from. Silence fell again, but it didn't feel hostile. It felt like a doorway, open, waiting on truth. Madison rested her hands on her lap, the silver cross bracelet catching candlelight. You hurt me, Jack. Deeply. I know, he whispered, and I carry that. Her voice trembled slightly now. I spent months wondering why I wasn't enough. He closed his eyes, pain slicing through him. Madison, it wasn't about you. It never is, she said, but it still leaves marks. Jack exhaled, shoulders dropping. What can I do to try to make things right? Madison didn't look at him at first. She looked at the cross above the altar. That depends on what you're trying to fix. Me or you. Her words sliced with clean clarity. He didn't respond right away because the honest answer was heavy. I think I'm trying to fix who I became. Madison nodded slowly as if she already knew. Then start there. Not with me. For the first time in years, Jack felt something crack open inside him. Not despair, something gentler, something redemptive. Madison stood, smoothing her sweater. We'll talk again, she whispered. Just don't run from God this time. Jack drove back to the city that night in complete silence. No music, no podcasts, no calls. Just the hum of the engine and his thoughts. The skyline eventually appeared on the horizon, glowing like a promise that had gone sour. For the first time, the lights didn't thrill him. They just made him feel small. Small and strangely seen. He walked into his penthouse and flipped on the lights. Marble floors, designer furniture, a view that screamed success. None of it clapped for him when he came home. None of it knew his name when he broke down on the couch. Money could fill closets, not the ache in his chest. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands over his face. Madison's words echoed in his mind. Start there. Not with me. He didn't even know what there was supposed to look like. He just knew he was tired of living like his soul was on mute. Tired of pretending the emptiness was normal. Jack slid off the couch and knelt on the rug, feeling ridiculous at first. Rich men didn't kneel, not unless there were cameras around. But there, in the quiet of his living room, he bent anyway. God, it's me, he whispered, the words catching. I don't even know how to do this. He took a shaky breath and kept going. I chose everything but you, and everything but her. Admitting it out loud made his chest tighten like a wound reopening. I don't want to keep living like this. I don't want to be this man. Tears slid down his face, surprising him by how hot they felt. There was no booming voice from heaven, no flash of lightning outside, just a strange, steady warmth spreading slowly through the room. A sense that maybe, just maybe, God wasn't finished with him yet. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and exhaled. Okay, he whispered. Do whatever you need to do. The next week felt different, even though nothing looked different on the surface. Meetings still happened. Contracts still needed signatures. His father still expected perfection. But Jack wasn't moving on autopilot anymore. He listened more, spoke less, questioned everything. For the first time, he wondered who was actually paying the highest price in his life. He started skipping the after-parties and fancy dinners. Instead, he went home earlier, sat with his thoughts, sometimes with an open Bible app he barely understood. Verses about pride, repentance, and mercy hit nerves he didn't know he had. He underlined one sentence and couldn't shake it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? It felt less like a verse and more like a mirror. His father noticed the shift before anyone else. You've been distant, he commented one afternoon in the office. Focused, Jack corrected, keeping his voice calm. His father narrowed his eyes. Don't let feelings get in the way of the bigger picture. Jack almost laughed. Feelings were the only honest thing he had left. Money still came in, but it didn't own him the same way. He caught himself looking at the company reports differently. Not just as numbers, but as lives attached to every paycheck. People with families, with small-town hopes, with hearts like Madison's. He wondered how many of them were paying for the Reynolds legacy with their peace. One day, he opened his laptop and hovered over the sell button for a property. It was the building across from Madison's cafe. They had plans to turn it into something flashy, something that would overshadow the whole block. His father had called it a gold mine. Jack now saw it as a threat. He sat back in his chair, the weight of the decision pressing down. If we develop this, we'll crush the street, he thought. The small businesses, the quiet charm, the soul of the town. Gone. He could almost hear Madison's voice. Bigger places don't mean deeper roots. His fingers moved before fear could stop them. Jack canceled the project. He sent an email rerouting funds into restoring the block instead of replacing it. Small businesses would get support, not competition. His assistant wrote back, stunned. Are you sure about this? He replied with 2 words that even surprised him. Absolutely sure. It didn't take long for his father to call. What is this nonsense I'm reading? The older man demanded. We don't do charity at the expense of profit, Jack. Jack inhaled deeply, bracing himself. Maybe we should, he answered softly. For once. The argument that followed was loud, sharp, and long overdue. His father accused him of being distracted, emotional, irresponsible. Jack didn't raise his voice. He just didn't back down this time. "I'm not losing my soul over another deal," he finally said. "If that disappoints you, I can live with that. I just can't live with me anymore." The call ended with a cold warning. "You'll regret this." Jack stared at the black screen, heart racing but strangely at peace. For the first time, regret wasn't sitting in the room with him. Conviction was. That night, he sent one more email to the pastor of the small-town church. He introduced himself awkwardly, explaining that he'd grown up around religion but never really lived it. He asked if they ever did one-on-one meetings or whatever people did when they were tired of faking it. The pastor replied a few hours later, "We don't turn away tired hearts here, come by anytime." Jack stared at the message, realizing God was answering prayers he barely knew how to pray. He closed his laptop and walked to the window, looking at the city below. Deals were still being made, lights still flashing, cars still rushing somewhere. But inside him, something had slowed down, something sacred, something new. "I'm coming back," he whispered, not just to the town but to the God Madison trusted all along. This time he wasn't returning to impress her. He was returning to be remade. Jack drove back to the small town a week later, this time in daylight. He expected the familiar twist of nerves in his stomach, but what he felt was quieter. Not ease, just purpose. The kind that comes when you know God is nudging you forward, one uncomfortable step at a time. He parked near Main Street, hands resting on the steering wheel for a long moment. The town was buzzing with life in a slow, cozy way the city never understood. Kids rode bikes down the sidewalk. A couple walked their dog near the courthouse lawn, and the air smelled like fresh cinnamon rolls from the bakery. Small towns had a heartbeat you could actually hear if you paid attention. Jack never listened before. Today he did. He walked past the hardware store, past the florist, past the antique shop Madison always adored. People glanced at him, some with curiosity, some with recognition. In small towns, news traveled faster than trucks on the highway. Everybody knew when you left. Everybody knew when you came back. When he reached Madison's cafe, he stopped in front of the window. It was brighter than he remembered. Warm string lights hung across the ceiling, and plants lined the sill in mismatched pots. It looked like a place built by someone who loved people deeply, someone who believed small things mattered. Inside, Madison was behind the counter, wiping down tables and talking with customers. She looked happy. Not just okay, happy, rooted happy. The kind of happiness that doesn't depend on perfect circumstances. Jack felt something in his chest tighten. Not jealousy, just awe. She wore a soft blue sweater that matched her eyes, her curls falling loosely around her shoulders. She laughed at something a teenager said, her hand touching her chest the way she did when joy caught her by surprise. Jack had forgotten how contagious that laugh was, how it made everything in the room warmer, how it used to make him want to be better. He stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming. A couple of customers turned toward him and someone muttered, "Is that Jack Reynolds?" Small towns never changed. They always whispered before they waved. Madison looked up and froze for a split second. Not cold, just startled. "Hi," he said softly, offering a small, unsure smile. Madison swallowed, then nodded politely. "Hey, Jack." Her voice was calm, professional, cafe owner tone, not broken heart tone, and somehow that hurt more than anger ever could have. "Can we talk?" he asked. She hesitated, glancing at the line forming behind him. "Give me a few minutes. I'm almost done with the morning rush." "Of course," he replied, stepping aside. He didn't want to interrupt her world. He wanted to understand it. He sat at a corner table watching her move from customer to customer with grace. She knew everyone's name, everyone's favorite drink, everyone's story. This was ministry disguised as coffee service. This was purpose lived quietly. It humbled him. When the cafe finally slowed, Madison brought him a cup of coffee. "Here," she said, setting it in front of him. "House blend. Still your favorite?" He blinked, surprised she remembered. "Yeah, it is." She sat across from him, hands wrapped around her own mug. "So?" she began gently. "What brings you here today?" He looked around the cafe first, needing a second to gather courage. "I wanted to see how you're doing." She raised an eyebrow. "You saw?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I did, and it's beautiful, Mads." A soft color touched her cheeks. "Thank you. God's been good." He smiled faintly. "He always was." I wasn't good at noticing." Madison didn't argue. She simply sipped her coffee, letting the truth settle in the space between them. He took a deep breath. "I'm trying to fix things in my life, not to make up for the past, just to stop repeating it." Madison's expression softened. "That's a brave place to start." He looked down, humbled. "It doesn't feel brave. It feels embarrassing. Growth usually is," she said gently. He let out a breathy laugh. "You're still wiser than me." "No," she replied. "I've just had more practice kneeling than running." The statement hit him like a warm, quiet truth. He wished he had learned to kneel before life broke him. He leaned back slightly. "Mads, I'm not asking for anything from you." She nodded. "I know. I just don't want to hurt you again." "You won't," she said quietly. "Because I don't expect anything." Her honesty didn't sting. It freed him. Expectations were where heartbreak lived. Grace lived somewhere else, somewhere she had clearly learned to stay. "So, can we start over? As two people who aren't who they used to be?" he asked carefully. Madison looked at him for a long moment. Finally, she nodded slowly. "We can," she said. "Just remember, starts only matter if they're honest." Jack nodded deeply. "For the first time in my life, Mads, I'm trying to be." Over the next few weeks, Jack found himself returning to the town more often than he expected. Not every day, and never without reason, but enough that Madison noticed. Sometimes he came for coffee. Sometimes he came just to breathe air that didn't taste like pressure. And sometimes he came because he finally learned how to listen to quiet things. Madison didn't treat him like a project or a story waiting to make sense. She treated him the way small towns treated everyone, honestly, without hurry. If she was busy, she said so. If she had time to talk, she'd sit across from him with a warm mug and steady eyes. She gave him boundaries, not bitterness. One afternoon, they walked outside during her break, sitting on the bench near the courthouse lawn. A breeze lifted the strands of her curls as she looked out toward Main Street. "You know, people have been talking," she said with a small smile. Jack let out a breath. "Small towns always talk." "Yeah," she said. "But this time, it's not all bad." He studied her expression, trying to understand what she meant. "Some folks think you're back for me," she continued. He tensed slightly. "Are you upset about that?" Madison shook her head. "No. I just know it's not the whole story." And she said it without blame, just clarity. Jack rested his elbows on his knees. "I don't even have the whole story yet," he confessed. Madison smiled gently. "That's the beautiful thing about healing. You figure it out one honest day at a time." He nodded slowly. Honesty didn't come naturally to him, but he was learning. He hesitated before asking, "Do you ever wonder what things would have been like if I hadn't left?" Madison breathed out softly. "Of course," she admitted. "I used to wonder every day." She looked down at her hands. "But wondering doesn't build a future. Choices do." Her words weren't harsh. They were factual, in the gentlest way. "Did it take you long to forgive me?" he asked. Madison's laugh was small, sincere. "Longer than I wanted. Shorter than I expected. God did most of the work," she added. Jack felt something in him unclench. "I'm glad you did," he said quietly. "Forgive you?" "No. Heal. You deserve that." Her eyes softened, but she didn't say anything. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the sound of birds and distant conversations. Real peace. Nothing staged, nothing rushed. It felt foreign and familiar all at once. Jack closed his eyes briefly, letting the warmth of the sun touch his face. "Madison, I didn't know life could be this. Still, that's because you never let yourself stop," she said gently. "You kept running, even when you weren't being chased. He let out a breath that bordered on a laugh. "You see me better than anyone ever has." She shrugged lightly. "I pay attention." Later that week, Madison invited him to a Wednesday night Bible study. Not because she wanted to impress him, because she didn't hide her life. He showed up wearing clothes too formal for a church basement, but nobody said a word. Small-town churches welcomed imperfect people with potluck-style grace. And Jack sat there, feeling strangely at home. During the closing prayer, he kept his eyes open, watching how Madison bowed her head. Every line of her face reflected honesty, faith that wasn't performative, but lived. It humbled him more than any sermon ever had. Afterward, she asked softly, "How was it?" "Different," he said. "In a good way." As they walked to their cars, the parking lot lights cast a golden glow around them. Madison pulled her cardigan tighter against the cool night air. "You're really trying, aren't you?" she asked. Jack nodded. "For the first time, I'm not trying to impress anyone." Madison gave a quiet smile. "That's when God does his best work." He leaned against his car door, searching for the right words. "I can't change what I did to you, and I don't want to pretend it didn't matter." "I know," she said gently. "But Jack, healing isn't about pretending, it's about transforming." Her voice carried a softness that steadied him. He exhaled slowly. "I want to keep being honest with you, even if it's messy." Madison nodded. "Honesty is better than perfection." He felt her words settle deep in his chest, a kind of truth that was almost a prayer. Before she got into her car, she paused. "Jack? Yeah? Just don't disappear again. Not without saying something." He nodded, the promise already forming in his heart. "I won't," he said firmly. She studied his face for a long moment, as if she were searching for sincerity rather than words. Whatever she saw made her shoulders relax. "Good," she whispered. Then she closed her door gently and drove off into the soft glow of streetlights. Jack stood there long after her car disappeared. The breeze was cool, the town quiet, the sky scattered with stars he hadn't noticed in years. He felt grounded in a way success had never provided. "I'm learning, God," he murmured. "For once, I'm learning." Jack's father called him into the main office on a Monday morning. The kind of meeting that felt like a summons, not a conversation. The conference room's glass walls made Jack feel exposed, like every decision he'd made was displayed behind him. His father stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. "We need to talk about your distractions," he said. Jack remained standing, refusing to shrink the way he always had. "I'm not distracted," he answered calmly. "I'm choosing differently." His father scoffed. "Choosing foolishly, you mean?" "No," Jack said. "Choosing honestly." His father tapped the table sharply. "This is exactly why we warned you years ago. That girl, Madison, she's holding you back again." Jack didn't flinch this time. "She's not holding me back," he said. "She's reminding me what matters." His father stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "We built this for you," he snapped. "Your future, your success. And it cost me my soul," Jack replied, voice steady. "I'm done losing myself to make you proud." Silence hit the room like a dropped weight. For the first time, Jack watched fear flicker across his father's face. Not fear of failure, fear of losing control. "You're throwing everything away," the older man warned. "No," Jack said. "I'm finally holding on to something that isn't made of money." He walked out before he could be stopped. Outside, the city sounded different. Less like a battlefield, more like background noise. Jack exhaled deeply, the kind of breath that feels like years leaving the body. For the first time, he wasn't running from anything. He was running toward something sacred. Meanwhile, in the cafe, Madison wiped counters that were already clean. Her heart had been restless since their last conversation. She prayed while she worked, whispering, "God, help me guard my heart but not harden it. Help me see truth, not fear." Each prayer felt like opening a window after years of keeping it shut. She didn't know what God was doing, only that something was shifting. Customers noticed her quiet, contemplative mood. "Everything okay, Mads?" an older woman asked kindly. Madison smiled softly. "Yeah, just thinking." The woman chuckled. Thinking usually means feeling too. Madison couldn't argue with that. She stepped outside during her break, breathing in the crisp afternoon air. Leaves rustled along Main Street. Kids laughed somewhere in the distance. A truck passed by. Someone waved. Life kept moving. But Madison felt a tug inside her spirit. A nudge, a whisper. Go to the church. It came softly, gently, the way God often speaks when hearts are tender. She didn't question it, just grabbed her cardigan and walked up the small hill toward the white church she loved. Every step felt purposeful. At the same time, Jack was driving back to town, unable to stay in the city a moment longer. He didn't have a plan or the perfect speech. He just knew he needed to go where God had first broken him open again, where he had seen Madison pray, where truth had finally caught up to him. He parked, climbed the church steps, and stepped inside quietly. The sanctuary was empty, sunlight spilling through stained glass onto wooden pews. The same stillness he felt the night he saw her praying returned, wrapping around him like an invitation. He walked slowly down the aisle. God, whatever you're doing, I'm here, he whispered. A soft sound came from the doorway behind him. Jack turned and froze. Madison stood there, breathless, her blue eyes widening at the sight of him. Jack, she said. He swallowed. Mads, I didn't know you'd be here. She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. I didn't plan to come, she admitted. I just felt like I needed to. Jack nodded slowly. Me too. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was holy, like the room itself understood what was unfolding. Madison walked toward the front pew, fingers brushing the wood lightly. What happened? She asked softly. Jack took a breath that trembled at the edges. I finally told my father the truth, he said, and I chose integrity over their approval. Madison's eyes softened. That's big, Jack. It felt big, he admitted, and terrifying, but right. She nodded. Doing the right thing usually feels scary at first. He smiled, small, honest. I'm learning that from you. Madison sat down, leaving space beside her like she always did. Jack, I'm not the same girl you left. I've grown, I've healed, I've changed. I know, he said quietly, and that's why I'm not asking for anything. He met her eyes, steady and sincere. I just want to walk honestly beside you, that's all. Madison breathed in, slow and deep. Then she nodded. Once, gently. Okay, she whispered. We can walk. Just don't outrun God this time. Jack's eyes softened, filled with understanding and quiet reverence. I won't, he promised. Not ever again. Madison and Jack didn't rush into anything. They didn't pretend the past hadn't happened or that forgiveness erased the need for patience. Instead, they walked, slowly, honestly, prayerfully, side by side through the weeks that followed. He showed up not with promises but with presence, not with charm but with change. Madison saw it in the way his shoulders dropped when he prayed, in the way he listened instead of defended himself, in the way he asked God for direction before making decisions he once took pride in controlling. Something inside him had shifted for real, and she could feel it before she fully believed it. Jack started volunteering at the church on Saturday mornings, fixing old pews, trimming hedges, repainting the fence. He never told Madison unless she happened to pass by. He wasn't doing it for her. He was doing it because something inside him finally understood what purpose felt like. Madison watched from a distance, heart softening in a way that scared her. She had learned to stand on her own 2 feet, to lead her cafe, to pray and trust without depending on anyone. But watching Jack kneel in the dirt, helping an elderly couple carry boxes for the church pantry, she realized this wasn't the same man who had walked away. This was someone God had broken open and rebuilt piece by piece. One afternoon, Madison arrived at the church earlier than usual and found Jack alone inside, sitting in the 3rd pew from the front. His head was bowed, hands clasped, not in desperation, but in gratitude. She stood quietly in the back, overwhelmed by the sight. Once she had prayed for God to touch his heart. Later she prayed to move on. And now, without either of them forcing anything, God had brought them here. Not to rewrite the past, but to redeem what pride had broken. When Jack looked up and saw her watching him, he didn't stand quickly or wipe his eyes. He just offered the softest smile, humble, real, human. Madison walked toward him, her footsteps echoing lightly through the sanctuary. She sat beside him, their shoulders close but not touching, both of them facing the altar where their stories had quietly shifted. "I'm glad you came," Jack said gently, his voice low and willed into honesty. Madison nodded. "I didn't plan to. I just felt pulled." He exhaled a breath that sounded like surrender. "That's how God keeps bringing me back. He pulls me toward what I kept running from." She folded her hands, letting the quiet settle. "Jack, I'm proud of who you're becoming." His eyes softened, and for a moment he looked younger, lighter. "I want my life to reflect something true this time. Not money, not legacy, just God." Madison smiled, and the kind of peace that only heaven gives washed over the moment. "That's the only foundation that lasts." He nodded, then whispered, "If, someday, you ever let me walk beside you in more ways than one, I want that to come from God too. Not from fear, not from loneliness, not from trying to fix what I broke. Just from His timing." Her breath trembled slightly, but not from pain this time. From hope. "I wouldn't want it any other way." They didn't hold hands. They didn't rush. They simply sat there, two hearts once shattered by pride now beating quietly under the same grace. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting golden light through the stained glass windows, painting their faces in colors that looked like redemption. And somewhere deep inside both of them, God whispered the same truth. The story isn't over. It's just becoming holy. Madison leaned her head slightly toward him, not touching, but closer than before. Jack closed his eyes, letting the peace settle into the cracks of the man he used to be. Healing had begun. Trust was growing. And grace. Grace was building what wealth never could. Because in the end, he walked away for riches, but God brought him back for redemption. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Someone out there needs to remember that God restores what pride destroys, and He writes endings more beautiful than anything we could ever imagine.